Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to Fallen London. We are currently in the second part of the Dilettante's debut, and we are in our lodgings, waiting to read a letter from the steadfast footman. A letter arrives at your home with the morning post. Creditors are refusing the steadfast footman's custom. Suppliers are suddenly backing out of agreements. He is concerned that the Eversons are plotting to spoil the Dilettante's occasion. The Everson heiress, a wild-eyed socialite, is holding a party the evening before the salon. Would you meet me at their mansion to see what they're up to? Implores the footman. We can make haste, dash off a letter in response. This will improve the salon's chance of success, or we can take our time. There's plenty of other matters to deal with. This will delay preparations and reduce the salon's chances of success, but perhaps you may wish to sabotage it. Absolutely, let's make haste. Or make haste. Your response sent, you hasten towards the rendezvous point. The Everson estate sits on the edge of Jekyll Gardens. Parkland stretches into the darkness, but the manor house is garishly lit. The steadfast footman edges out from behind a topiary hedge and beckons you to join him. Together, you slip onto the grounds. A newly built folly affords you enough cover to observe the mansion. The mansion's red brick is starkly modern compared to the Fairfax abode. White pillars flank the tall entrance, and a soaring glass conservatory dominates the rear of the building, from which echoes scraps of slurred song and muffled laughter. The old mistress would have been ashamed of such goings-on, says the steadfast footman with a sniff. Okay, so we need to build up spying on the Eversons to advance the story. Let's ask the footman about the Eversons quietly to avoid detection. The footman's lip curls and he straightens his shoulders. The master doesn't know this. No need to worry him, but the Eversons paid for those classless renovations through smuggling, he says. I have friends at the docks. They said Everson's people have been seen on the Isle of Cats, but who would listen to us? That's weird. I was sent to go to the Isle of Cats in Sunless Seas yesterday. I haven't been there, so I don't actually know what's there. Okay, so we can ask the footman about Lady Fairfax. Yet again, quietly, to avoid detection. The footman's gaze remains fixed on the mansion. His voice, when he speaks, is rough. I was a navigator. She was a fair captain, no matter what people said. With an absent expression, he combs his fingers through his hair. A few strands come loose. I begged the mistress to stay, he says. That, or take me with her, but she needed me to look after the house. Okay. Go where? Okay, so the first thing we'll do is... we could just wander around the grounds openly. A riskier proposition, but you can always pretend to be a lost guest. Yes. Oh god. A ragged cheer erupts from the conservatory. A pair of gentlemen stagger out for a tryst beside the fountain, loudly telling one another to hush. One spots you and doubles over laughing, but his companion flaps his hands at you, as though at an ill-tempered sheep. That didn't go to plan. Try again. A cart rumbles towards the trade entrance. You dart forward to watch as a servant greets the driver. When she opens a crate to check its content, it reeks of stagnant salt water. Her flickering lantern reveals a warm golden glint from within. Let's try to observe from the shadows. Emptied of its cargo, the cart rumbles past you. The driver is swathed in a heavy coat, but his fluid movements give him away. He is a rubbery man. The footman grips the rough walls. His fingers, or the stones, crack. I didn't expect the Eversons wouldn't normally deal with the rubbery types. If it was imported spirits or honey, now I'd not be surprised by that. Someone inside is playing the piano, badly. The footman winces, rubbing his ear. Then he tenses and lifts his hand. You hear it too? Footsteps approaching, more purposeful than those of the revellers. The footman backs against the wall. A stooped shadow then circles round toward the edge of the grounds. You move in the other direction. We've got two options. We could either ambush them, spring out at the right moment, or we could step out and call to the walker. Let's do that. Politer, perhaps, than lurking in the shadows. Why, hello there, my dear fellow. The walker is the wild-eyed socialite, dressed in a magenta gown. Her wide-brimmed hat is laden with feathers and silk flowers. She must be around the same age as the languid Dilettante, but looks healthier, as if more inclined to the playing field than the arts. Why in the world are you in my garden? She cries. Don't tell me you've fallen violently in love with me and you couldn't stay away. She giggles at her own joke. The party in the conservatory has quietened, as though every guest is holding their breath. The socialite speaks with the overly careful dictation of one who has had a long night of celebration. I know you! I heard you'd be gadding about the Fairfax place, she says. You're quite wasted on them. They hold on to the feud as though it's the only thing that matters. Though I suppose they don't have much else these days. We can defend the Fairfax's honour, or we can flatter her. Personally, I think the best option is to flatter her. You are trespassing, after all. You poor thing, says the socialite. The Fairfaxes will drag you down with them, just like they did with that horrid footman. You know how long he's been working to the bone, keeping that hovel running? He doesn't sleep. I heard from the knife boy that he scrubs the floors himself, on his knees. He wobbles as she reaches to give your arm a sympathetic pat. The Fairfaxes may have kept an empty title, she says, but Captain George Everson was decorated by King Charles. What have they done? Gallivanted around the Z and gone mad? Well, we got the socialite's regard, I suppose. A guest calls the socialite's name from the upper window. I'm coming back soon, darling, she thrills. With a discreet yawn, she returns her attention to you. Her eyes gleam in the low phosphorescence of the garden fungi. Let's ask her about herself. She is evidently in a talkative mood. The gin, perhaps, has loosened her tongue. Oh, I'm enjoying myself as much as I can while I can, says the wild-eyed socialite. I think it's rather my duty to make the most of our good fortune. To show we belong, you know. She shakes back her curls, sending a pink feather drifting to the ground. There is a smirk to her lip. Besides, my parents are already telling me to start courting seriously, or learn to run the household, or whatever it is they find interesting, she says. I don't need the dilettantes stirring up trouble so that they can stop me having fun. I heard rumours, says the wild-eyed socialite, that the footman and Lady Fairfax had an improper connection. If you, found proof that would put the Fairfaxes down for good, we Eversons are indefinitely more interesting, as I'm sure you can tell. Wouldn't it be splendid? Will you do that work for me? She pokes your arm for emphasis. Her eyes gleam like a cat before it pounces on a small, adorable, and short-lived animal. No, I absolutely not. I agree to help the Fairfaxes. You are not the sort to go back on your word. Or we could consider it. Subtle choice. Remain gracefully non-committal, but no. The fact that these people are smugglers makes me think they're not very nice people, so absolutely not. Oh dear, says the wild-eyed socialite cheerfully. Well, I'll see you at the salon and toast to your misfortune. May the best family win. Despite her tone, she clearly means business. You will need to keep an eye out at the salon. She meanders back to the conservatory. As soon as she flings open the door, shrieks of delight erupt. A discordant piano music rings across the gardens. You signal to the steadfast footman, who soon slides up to you. Best to be gone, he says. Together, you make your way to the edge of the grounds. Ragged singing follows you. You've returned to the Fairfax's mansion. You find the languid dilettante in the library, where, though books are sparse, the shelves have been polished mirror bright. A sketchbook is balanced upon his knees. He is drawing a ship, but then tears out the page and crumples it into a ball. He looks up eagerly. I hope your visit was successful. Let's tell him about the socialized offer of employment. It will do little for his nerves, but he might find it useful. The languid dilettante stands abruptly. The sketchbook falls to the floor. Unheeded, you catch sight of a drawing of a jagged, intricate crystal. That kind is never satisfied, he says. She is the worst of them, spending the money we should have, ruining the reputation that should be ours with her dancing and her drinking and her honey-mazed wanderings, while we languish here. He draws a trembling breath and sinks back onto the couch. The footman pushes a glass of water into his hands with a conciliatory murmur. The languid dilettante pauses and surveys the surroundings. His gaze settles upon a painting of a storm at Z, and a smile flickers across his face. Tomorrow, I'll restore our family's name, he says. I am certain of it. Please be here early if you've been absolutely invaluable. We'll make our farewells. The languid dilettante needs his rest, no doubt. I'll see you very soon, says the languid dilettante. As you make ready to leave, he says. Ah, and do take this, if it's of use to you. He indicates a crumpled sheaf of papers. The steadfast footman looks alarmed, but he relaxes after scanning over your shoulder. It is a set of hand-inked maps, drawn in a spidery hand. Please speak with my footman when you arrive, says the dilettante. I understand he'd appreciate your assistance. Oh, 10 map scraps. Okay, so this is the next day. We are here now, shortly before the salon. The air is oppressive this evening. Tall sculptures of creatures you do not recognize flank the parlour doors, and looking at them too closely makes your eyes water. The curtains are closed, and the lights are low, giving the rooms an eerie cast. We can search for the steadfast footman. The languid dilettante intimated that he might need your assistance. You edge up scuffled stairs to the attic. The ceiling is low. Wind whistles through cracked windows. The steadfast footman is crouched over a copper pan filled with bubbling amber. An caged nightingale sits beside him. The footman starts as you approach. His gaze darts to the bird, to you, and back again. The Eversons couldn't buy all the amber up, he says. The nightingale twitches and flutters against the bars of the cage. The steadfast footman watches it dispassionately and beckons you closer. He stands and winds up a coral-encrusted music box. Its tune pulls like the yanking dark of the Z. The bird's movements slow. Its eyes glaze. Finally, just sits there, watching. So we can listen to the music, or we can interrupt the music. What is happening here? Let's interrupt the music. This sounds like mind control. I'm putting together a surprise. A parlour trick for the guests tonight, says the steadfast footman. He gestures with the music box. While I sail with Lady Fairfax, we picked up some fascinating curios. The nightingale is still motionless. The music slows, but does not stop. The footman's expression is far away. The amber reveals the truth of a creature and leaves it forever altered, he says. His voice grows low, conspiratorial. It will be a beautiful spectacle, but I needed to test it before this evening. His eyes are rheumy and flecked with grey. He picks up the nightingale's cage and hands it to you. Don't let the amber touch his skin, he says. Hold the cage beneath. What will become of the nightingale? At some point this updated halfway through and I don't know what's going to happen to the bird. Yes, it required me to refresh the page as I clicked that button, and then it didn't tell me what it was. And now the option is gone. Well, you know, curiosity. Let's immerse the bird in the amber. Well, You know what, stop whatever this is. This party trick is in poor taste, I don't like this. You carefully place the cage upon the floor, when the nightingale returns to its senses and flutters wildly against the bars. The steadfast footman grips the music box with long fingers, but does nothing more. A resinous smell of amber wasps through the room. "Listen," he says, elongating the words into a hiss. "This is for the salon, for the master. Please, if you have any compassion, don't interfere tonight. You helped me, us, this far." The languid dilettante bells clangs from downstairs. The footman shuffles to the stairs, beckoning you to follow. But we can throw open the doors. Guests trickle into the mansion. Some are discreet about their curiosity about the state of the manor, while others stare openly. When the wild-eyed socialite arrives in eye-wateringly vivid blue gown, it's with an entourage of other aristocrats. Her voice soon soars over the other guests, full of self-righteous outrage. She bustles over to you with a petulant glare. "Are you responsible for those horrible poets being here?" she says. "Must I beset my enemies at every turn? We can close ranks. I don't want to help the socialite stir up troubles. That's straight out of here. We can close ranks against the socialite. Her behaviour is not the done thing at such a formal event. Or we can flatter her, assure her that no one here could possibly damage her reputation. Yes, let's placate the beast. You bring wine. You hurry the socialite away from her detractors, and you tactfully propose flattery and sympathy in equal measure. "Perhaps you're right," she says. "Perhaps they're simply envious." Despite her friends fluttering around her, she does not sound entirely convinced. Still, she quietens down, and the rest of the guests settle. A pair of sharp-eyed matrons drift around the parlour looking for flaws, but they have only praise for the candles. An elderly brigadier recounts tales of valour to any who will listen, and many who will not. The steadfast footman is pouring drinks. He glances about if looking for something. His hand trembles for a moment before he steadies himself. He noticed you looking and turns to meet your gaze. But something is wrong. His movement is jerky and awkward, as though his neck has too many joints. He gives you an ingratiating smile and suggests that you explore the party. Well, as with all good parties, let's head for the buffet, laden with meats and delicate pastries. Tiny slices of mushroom tart, apples shaped into birds, and slivers of eel wrapped in pastry have been laid out. Each dish could be eaten in a single bite, more for show than to sate the appetite. A couple of elderly aristocrats are already grazing. Several guests have gathered to observe the spiny sphere on the table's centerpiece. It's larger than your head and sits in a crystal bowl of clear water. Whether it's flora or fauna is hard to tell. One reaches to touch it, and another slaps away their hand. Let's top up drinks. It's only polite and will help smooth the proceedings. While guests wait their turn at the table, you provide discreet top-ups to crystal glasses. Some of the guests blink at you in bafflement, while others treat you as just another servant. Either way, your assistance nudges the mood towards cheer. The wild-eyed socialite is examining the pastries, but she looks restless. As a group of guests bear down towards the table, her gaze darts at the door to the kitchens. As the steadfast footman tops up the guests' glasses, he wears a preoccupied frown. He excuses himself quietly before striding in the other direction. We have three options. We can block the socialite from the kitchens, gather the poets to the table, and prevent the socialite from sneaking about. We can nudge the poets away so you can help the socialite. What manner of meat is that, exactly? Or we can follow the footman. He mentioned he'd be arranging a simple party trick, but do you trust him? Let's follow the footman. Something is going on here that I'm not privy to, and I am curious as to what it is. The steadfast footman is hauling a vat down the winding servants' corridor. It scrapes along the stone. His footsteps drag, but he continues on his implacable way. At the cellar steps, he halts, then glances up. Someone there? His voice cracks nervously. He must hurry back to the party The mood had slipped a little while you were gone. I know I've worked against the Fairfax's salon. I was curious what he's doing. Well, we can mingle at the salon. While reading a poem aloud, one of the wild-eyed socialite's companions threatens to sob, overcome with the emotion of it all. The rest of the entourage hurries her way to avoid too much of a scene. The socialite watches dispassionately. Perhaps they weren't such good friends, after all. Well, we can move to the drawing room. Voices rise in argument or agreement, followed by the clinking of glasses. Guests have made themselves comfortable upon the chaise longue and armchairs in front of the elaborately tiled fireplace. As you enter, you catch the end of a debate which has risen between a bohemian sculptor and a frequent visitor to the Pantheon. As far as you can tell, their point of contention is whether commerce has a place in the world of art. The result is inconclusive. Still, both parties are satisfied with their moral high ground. Do you know what? Encourage the discussion. I love a good debate. You encourage the Somerset lecturers to join in, and they do so readily. A discussion about aestheticism and hedonism ensues, backed up with references to obscure scholars from long before the fall. The wild-eyed socialite grows restless, for the members of her entourage are fixed upon the debate and beg her to stay for a while. She glares at you, but remains in her seat. I'm going to go back to following the footman, I think. I'm overly curious as to what he's doing. What will his experiment entail? Be sure you've spent all the time you wish. The steadfast footman is in intense conversation with the musicians of the string quartet. He hands each of them a piece of sheet music. It was Lady Fairfax's favourite, he says. Play it when the master descends. As the cellist reads the music, her grip tightens on her bow. She quietly hums the tune. Eventually her companion has to jog her elbow to shake her out of her reverie. When you turn your attention back to the party, the mood has dampened a little. You continue to work against the salon, but I think he's doing something that's just horrendous. Wine glasses and empty plates litter the buffet table. A guest is staring at a purple, spiny centerpiece, neglecting her eel canapé. A sea urchin, she says thoughtfully. Or something else. Fascinating. When someone jostles past her for another slice of truffle tart, she shakes herself from her reverie. Go to the ballroom. Applause ripples as the dance concludes. The strings rise once more. The dancers move sedately to a minor melody that surges and falls like a blustery wind. It puts a spring in your step, but draws tears to your eyes. A dancer in extravagant taffeta stumbles into you. I've never heard anything quite like it, he says, his eyes glazed. Someone told me that Lady Fairfax heard it beneath the waves and wrote it down. Her companions draw him back into the dance, his eyes half closed, ecstatically. Compared to the music, his partner is inconsequential. A fever-quick polka strikes up. Hands meet, feet stamp, gowns whirl. Several poets stand scornfully at the edge of the room. You overhear one saying they wouldn't dream of dancing at such a respectable gathering. It would quite ruin their reputation. But a polka is a polka. Let's dance. You whisk into the centre of the room as a lively polka strikes up once more. It's a hectic experience, and your companions are hard-pressed to keep up with you. But the spectators cheer as the dance concludes. The wild-eyed socialite has moved into the centre of the dance, executing a vigorous set of half-jumps. A handful of guests applaud as the dance concludes, and she gives a curtsy. I absolutely must have a drink, she announces, and drifts casually towards the stairs. No doubt she intends to ferret around while the rest of the party is occupied. You notice the steadfast footman too. He's heading in the other direction, perhaps with his own matters to deal with. Several poets stand scornfully at the edge of the room. You overhear one saying they wouldn't dream of dancing at such a respectable gathering. It would quite ruin their reputation. Okay, so let's follow the footman. In an alcove, away from the rest of the party, you find the steadfast footman talking quietly to a friend of the wild-eyed socialite. There is to be a surprise for her, he says, in the cellar. The master wants to encourage the families to be friends again. It'll be tremendous fun. The young woman is excitable enough to believe him, and readily agrees to invite the socialite to visit the cellar. You wanted to look down there anyway, she says. It'll be wonderful. The amber, the Everson Sion. This scheme. You can only imagine that the footman plans to enact his experiment upon the socialite. A grisly fate, certainly. Does the languid dilettante know of his plans? A desultory argument breaks out between a middle-aged couple. They appear more bored with each other's company than angry. The guests' appetite for revelry has subsided, but is not yet sated. Several have collapsed, not so gracefully, onto the couches. A hush of expectation settles. The music grows preponderous. It is time for the languid dilettante to make his grand entrance. Let's fetch him. He has had time to prepare. He should be ready now. The languid dilettante is fidgeting while the steadfast footman adjusts his ivory-coloured cravat. His dark suit is imposing, the gentleman himself less so. The dilettante grasps for a handkerchief and mops his brow. I do hope, he says. Swallows and ducks his head, looking suddenly younger than his years. It's time. I suppose. It'll be alright, won't it? We've made sure of it, says the footman. He brushes a speck of lint from the dilettante's lapel. It'll be perfect. The languid dilettante brushes off the steadfast footman's assurances. What would you know about it? He snaps. Go and check on the food. The footman nods silently, and the dilettante sighs as he leaves. It's been a long day, he says quietly. I'm obliged to dance with the socialite, but hopefully it'll be brief. His dark eyes lock with yours, but he pauses. There is a moment to speak before he descends. Inform me of what his servant's been up to. Let's do it. The dilettante ought to be told, even if it frays his nerves. The languid dilettante swallows, and his gaze flickers to the floor. Would he really? Could he? He murmurs. Surely he wouldn't do something so monstrous. But he lacks conviction. He pulls anxiety at a loose thread on his cuff. I won't let something dreadful happen at my party, he says. Please, go to her, warn her, don't allow it. Oh, balls. You have a 0% chance. Well, not helping her. You move to the base of the spiral staircase and usher the guests to assemble. The languid dilettante stands at the summit, his face pale but regal against the faintly glimmering dark of his suit. The quartet begins a stately, mournful sonata. Candlelight glints on the dilettante's dark hair as he descends. Will you keep an eye on things? He murmurs as he passes. I need everything under control. Okay, so it's a 0% chance, but should I try it anyway? What's going to happen? Scornful laughter. If you're trying to scare me with fairy stories, says the wild-eyed socialite, it's not working. Apparently I'm to dance with the Fairfax boy. I bet his hands are dreadfully clammy. She whisks away toward the languid dilettante. Her expression is reminiscent of a courteous martyr approaching her execution. Oh, there we go. Couples move to the dance floor. The melody beckons you with them. While the music is technically perfect, your neck itches as though something was running its tongue down the skin. Let's dance skillfully. The music is consuming. You mean to match its beauty. You have never heard this music before, but your bones know the dance. Gliding with your partner in the stately waltz, your movements are smooth and graceful. For a moment you form, and a shriek of the fiddles in perfect harmony. You cannot leave the dance even if you wished. On the dais you watch blood trickle down the violinist's fingerboard. Oh dear. The languid dilettante and the wild-eyed socialite are dancing, their expressions matched in delighted ricases. The strings grow faster, pushing the waltz into a frenzy. When one dancer stumbles, his companion bears him up without pause. The socialite and dilettante slow for a moment. A guest cuts in and takes the socialite's place. The dilettante does not seem to notice. At the door to the cellar, the steadfast footman calls to the socialite. "It's time, miss. Let's rouse the dilettante. Rescue the wild-eyed socialite together." Because I have 0% chance on all the other ones, so... You catch the languid dilettante by the elbow and remind him of your misgivings about the steadfast footman's plans, and his dazed expression slips. "The music," he mutters, pinching the bridge of his nose. Oh God! You race for the cellar, and you descend. The air grows humid, your eyes sting with smoke, and the resinous scent burns at the back of your throat. The cellar opens out. The footman is leading the wild-eyed socialite towards a candlelit vat of molten amber. The dilettante shouts a warning, but the socialite does not even flinch. The steadfast footman halts. His gaze darts between you and the languid dilettante. His lips move, but no words emerge. Eventually he says, "You ought to return to the party. The guests will miss you." The dilettante bristles. "Can't just throw her in there, can he?" he says, evidently losing some nerve. We can pull the wild-eyed socialite away, save her from the footman's grisly plans, with the languid dilettante's help. You dart forward to pull the wild-eyed socialite to safety. The steadfast footman barely seems to notice, focused as he is on the languid dilettante's distraught face. "It was the only way," the footman implores. The dilettante swallows. "That doesn't matter," he says, and turns away. He does not see the stricken expression upon the footman's face. The music has shifted from the earlier hypnotic frenzy to a slow, melancholy melody that puts you in the mind of darkened, distant shores. Several aristocrats are asking pointed questions about where the wild-eyed socialite has disappeared to. Her companions are adrift, wandering to and from the drinks table. The languid dilettante is shaking. He gulps down a glass of wine with barely time to breathe. "I did not think tonight would end like this," he says, wiping his mouth. I never thought he'd try such a thing." He swallows and runs his fingers through his hair. He glances at the wild-eyed socialite. There is, perhaps, a glimmer of sympathy in his expression. "Let's speak with the dilettante and the socialite. Perhaps you can encourage a friendship this evening between the branches of the family." While the rest of the guests chatter and prepare themselves for home, you draw the languid dilettante and wild-eyed socialite into conversation. While stilted and uncomfortable at first, with a couple more glasses of wine and your own patience, you hit upon a vein of gold. They have a long list of mutual acquaintances. They detest all of them. This discovery keeps them occupied for hours. A short while after the salon, you receive an invitation to return. The manor has only scuff marks on the hallway tiles to show for the earlier celebrations. How does the dilettante fare after his grand entrance into society? You find the languid dilettante in his tower room, hunched over a desk, writing letters thanking the guests for attending. "Ah!" he says, blinking at you. "I must have been scribbling these for over an hour." He stretches his arms in front of him, and his shoulders crack. "Things are looking up," he says. "The Eversons are still up to their tricks, legal loopholes and the like, but I hope the salon will herald greater things." Shadows from the flickering candlelight play across the walls. The bearskin rug has been partly rolled up, as though the languid dilettante grew weary halfway through. A parcel sits upon a rickety side table. The dilettante flicks a hand towards it. "Your payment," he says. "I could not let you go unrewarded." Okay, so we can ask about his plans for the future. Well, what will he do now the salon is over? The languid dilettante exhales a sigh. "And a visit with the family lawyers tomorrow," he says. "See if we can rustle up anything useful from Lord Fairfax's records." He gives you a sudden bright smile. "Even if they're still at large, the party did help," he says. "We raised our profile and I talked to so many people I never thought so many people would attend." Okay, let's ask after the wild-eyed socialite. Has he heard anything of her after the salon? The languid dilettante flicks his fingers towards the window dismissively. "Oh, he says. "After her usual nonsense, I'm sure." His mouth curls with a hint of envy. "She runs around worrying about nothing but the next party," he says. And here I am, scrabbling for scraps. Let's ask after the footman. The languid dilettante shrugs. He's perfectly well, he says, as far as I know. He shuffles the paper on his desk. One flutters to the ground. It's a note from a brigadier congratulating him on the evening. You and he did tremendously, though, he adds. At least he didn't get fired, I suppose. Okay, open the parcel. Something sloshes inside. This will conclude the story. Inside, along with a fist-sized chunk of amber, is a small tank containing a jellyfish, glowing with purple phosphorescence. It drifts restlessly back and forth in the water. It was caught off the coast of the city of Varsars, says the languid dilettante. I used to love watching it when I was a child. He stands to clasp your hand. My thanks again, he says. You have changed this family's path more than you know. You step outside, into the dark. Within its tank, the jellyfish gently bumps against the glass. From the tower window, the dilettante waves farewell. And we got a captured jellyfish, and a nodule of pulsating amber, and the memory of a tale. And with that, I will be ending this episode. That was a very well written story. This episode has gone on a little longer. I sensed I was near the end and I didn't want to have a 10-minute third episode and be like, oh, damn. So, thank you very much for watching. Please let me know what you think. Let me know if anything went any differently for you. I am oddly intrigued as to what happens if the plan with the footman goes to place. It didn't really match my moral compass, but I know some people out there must. But, as always, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.